Good evening, everyone. I'm Akush Lapinder. It's good having you back with us. The government in the line of fire and firing the shots, one of its own and a newly minted independent. Centerville MP Reese Chipman sought to provide rhyme and reason through song Shake the Dilly Tree for added reason why he opted to resign as a member of the governing party. And in doing so, he questioned whether being a part of a party should be loyalty, integrity, or being a sellout.
And there's such a thing as maturity in leadership. Insecure leadership, Mr. Speaker, will not work. Not in a world so democratized by freedom of speech and the World Wide Web. Members, loyalty cannot be because you gave me a job. Loyalty cannot be that I must agree with everything you say at the expense of my constituents. Loyalty, Mr. Speaker, should never outweigh integrity.
Turning his attention to the proposed legislation, Mr. Chipman says the Disaster Preparedness and Response Amendment Bill is another brought without the necessary regulations.
I've had concerns about bills being brought to the House of Assembly and saying that the Prime Minister made. I believe that this bill should reflect that the Prime Minister must, to put it in context, require mandatory evacuation. But to me, we're giving the Prime Minister an option. I believe that we need more guidelines, more policy-driven legislation to reflect even education of disaster preparedness.
Well, never once to mince words, Pine Ridge MP Frederick McAlpine today urged the government not to rush the passing of the proposed legislation.
We need to step back, take a deep breath, and be logical and not emotional about what we're going to do moving forward. Mr. Speaker, Pine Ridge, along with the Bahamian people, get the impression if there was no hurricane, there would be no bill. We should have been called back from vacation as an assembly prior to the entrance of Hurricane Dorian, and then perhaps presented with this bill. Pine Ridge would have considered it even timelier. We are reacting to an action as opposed to systematically and intellectually coming up with something conducive and uncontroversial for generations to come.
According to the F&M MP, that's not to say he's against mandatory evacuations, but to go where? One needs to understand, he said, the psyche and circumstances of those not willing to leave.
Whereas it is important to eventually have a mandatory evacuation bill, Pine Ridge Abaco thinks it's initially far more important for the government to build structurally sound, hurricane-proof centers throughout the Bahamas. Then we can discuss mandatory evacuation. Mama says you're putting the cart before the horse. Mr. Speaker, it makes no logical sense for me demanding mandatory evacuation without having a safe place to put the evacuees. Mr. Speaker, there's doing no rocket science for this. This is common sense.
He's also of the view that the proposed legislation lacks specifics, as it should also speak to fires, flooding, medical outbreaks, that it gives too much power to a prime minister, and that if not properly assessed, can open the door to an undemocratic state of governance. Mr. McAlpine's convinced that there needs to be a clear-cut plan for the revitalization and modernization for the Northern Bahamas.
The country needs leadership that is clear and concise with what the plan is, how long it will take to be executed, and the purpose or the proposed period for the accomplishment.
The Pine Ridge rep says he no longer wants to hear about what Hurricane Dorian did, but what the government and the Grand Bahama Port Authority will do. Well, the Pine Ridge MP also bringing to House members' attention the perception that the Prime Minister showed more passion and compassion to the people of Dominica post-Hurricane Maria 2 years ago than he did for Bahamians following Dorian's passing.
People are extremely upset that the Prime Minister went to Dominica faster than he came to East Grand Bahama, where Bahamians' lives were lost. The most destructive part of Grand Bahama took our Prime Minister over a month to get there.
Local police and defense force officers were dispatched to Dominica to assist with recovery efforts there. The government also agreed to accept its students and schools here as the island rebuilds. The Pine Ridge MP questioned why Dominica didn't reciprocate, considering Grand Bahama students have been away from the classroom for weeks.
And Dominica did for us actually exactly what I propose we do for them: money and physical assistance. Dominica is a part of CARICOM, of which all member states and affiliates, as I'm aware of, all pledged to give $100,000 to any catastrophic or natural disaster within the region. The Bahamas has done this on many occasions, as we too are part of CARICOM. So those who would have us believe that there's something special being done by Dominica tend to be somewhat misleading.
Now, Abaco and Grand Bahama students returned to school on Thursday. Meantime, the opposition's deputy leader contends that the proposed amendment is unnecessary legislation. Reiterating a view his party holds firm, Chester Cooper argues that legislators should not be in the business of drafting and passing bills outside the supreme law.
Should people remain in their homes in low-lying areas during a storm? Of course not. Should we seek to save lives? Of course we should. But we must find the balance in law without offending the Constitution. We must use existing laws before passing more. This all seems poorly thought out, to be frank. This bill also seeks to vest more powers in the Prime Minister, which could lead to more politicizing of disaster relief and recovery efforts.
And this new layer of bureaucracy, he said, is unhelpful. As far as Mr. Cooper sees it, the government should really be talking about a multi-stage evacuation plan, a practical recovery strategy. He questioned why aren't legislators debating a bill to restructure the law to fix the National Emergency Management Agency.
We should allow NEMA as an authority to do its job effectively and prepare for and deal with the aftermath of storms and other disasters. And we should fix the management structure since we deem that there are deficiencies. I am told that NEMA has fewer than a dozen employees. So let's staff it properly. Let's establish a proper playbook to roll out during disasters. Let's have more frequent drills where appropriate and practical they can be achieved.
Mr. Cooper agrees the Bahamas can recover from Dorian, but it will take a well-thought-out, structured plan, and that the opposition stands ready to assist. Meantime, senators meeting for the first time since the passing of Hurricane Dorian last month, members of the upper chamber used the opportunity to extend condolences to family members of former parliamentarian Tennyson Wells, who was laid to rest last Friday, and the Broadcasting Corporation's acting general manager, the late Colin Trotman. Trotman died in August at the age of 57. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.